It's very difficult to understand how demoralized people are. And certainly many young men are in that category. And you get these casual insults, these incels. What does it mean? It's like, well, these men, they don't know how to make themselves attractive to women who are very picky, and good for them. Women, like, be picky. That's your gift, man.
If you're a conservative, you don't need a vision in some sense, because what you tend to do is walk the tried and true path. And in some sense, that's a replacement for a vision, or it's a traditional vision and the disadvantage you have. I would say on that front is that when people push you, in relationship to your traditional vision, you may not be able to articulate it well, so someone might object to someone who's conservative. It's like, well, defend marriage. It's like, well, people think.
Demand high standards from your men, fair enough, but all these men who are alienated, it's like they're lonesome and they don't know what to do, and everyone piles abuse on them. As far as critiques go, that was kind of low level. I mean, once I got painted as Red Skull, magical super Nazi, that was kind of the end of the insults. There's no place past that. So when Olivia Wilde made those comments, the first thing I did was go look at the preview for a movie, which I quite liked. I thought I would go see that movie probably, and perhaps I will. It didn't really bother me. My family and I talked about it right away, and we were able to respond to it with some degree of humor, which then people completely misunderstood. I said I hope that, that if I had to be played by someone, he's a very good-looking man, and so that seems all right, And then I said something like, I hope he gets my fashion style choice right when he plays me. And it was a joke. All that was a joke.
Women who are afraid of men confuse competence with power, and then they believe that the road to peace is the antagonism to power, and because they don't discriminate between power and competence, they become antagonistic to their son's competence, and then they reap exactly what they sow.
I mean, you've been so controlled today, and yet in that brief moment, you got very emotional. Why?
It's really something to see constantly how many people are dying for lack of an encouraging word. And how easy it is to provide that if you're careful. Give credit where credit is due. And to say, you're a net force for good if you want to.
Do you believe you're a net force for good?
Net? Yes. In all the details? Probably not. No one's perfect. So people make their mistakes as they stumble uphill.
They end up with incompetent boys. And why what went wrong? It's like, how about you discouraged every sign of competence, every chance you had? A while back, woman author in the United States talked about just how difficult it was to stop her son from playing with guns. I took every gun out of the house, or even anything that remotely looked like a gun. And that boy, he'd take the toothbrush and shoot the cat with it. And how appalling is that? It's like, oh, you're quite the monster. Aren't you? You saw something manifest into your son that was so deep, this desire to point and shoot.
Are you the intellectual hero to these people?
Sure, why not? People have been after me for a long time because I've been speaking to disaffected young men. What a terrible thing to do that is. I thought the marginalized were supposed to have a voice. I think that it's been difficult for me to optimally regulate my irritation at times over the last few years. And I'm trying to get that right, to figure out because a lot of things that have happened have outraged me. And then I'm not exactly sure what emotional tone to take as a consequence of that outrage. And that's a very complicated thing to figure out. And that's been exacerbated, that problem, by the fact that my family and I have been the targets of very conniving and and attacks. I get better and better at listening, you know, and I'm better and better at finding my way forward with the words that I choose. And it's just a continual, in some sense, incremental expansion.
Let's say that despite your best efforts, you couldn't crush it. And then you didn't even notice that you were spending all that time dying to crush it. And it was so deep that you couldn't. And you still regarded what you were doing as a virtue.
I probably got better too at seeking out corrective information. So for example, I got banned from Twitter recently for making a statement that I don't regret, by the way. But I had a friend of mine, two friends of mine, grill me, and I put that on YouTube. It's called Mean Tweets. It was an hour and a half, I said, and both of them are very, very smart people. One of them's more liberal than I am, I would say, but a very good advocate for that liberal position. And I said, well, let's hash this out. There's some things I've said that have made people angry, and you think I made them unnecessarily angry, and that I was unnecessarily harsh in my tone.
Did they change your mind?
They changed my approach, you know, because one of the things I decided was that I would try to be equally judicious in my words, but that I would use a calmer and more measured tone. And I don't mean use instrumentally. I mean that I would attempt to make the effort to take as much unnecessary emotion out of the statement as possible.
World's richest man saying he wants to restore truth to Twitter, trust to Twitter. It's the public. Square now. That's how people communicate fine news. You were personally impacted by Twitter's left leaning censorious ways. You have now been restored. What impact do you think Twitter becoming an even playing field will have for who knows?
And so I started to do that in some of my more recent videos. I think a lot of the journalists who've gone after me in some sense have that. They think, there's part of them that thinks, I'll be the person that finally exposes him for what he is.
Yeah.
But then they find out that I'm not who they thought that I am. Or at least I'm not quite as demonic as they thought I might be.
Well, Professor Stephen Hawking, before he died, gave me his last television interview, and he said that the biggest threat to the future of mankind was when artificial intelligence learned to self-design. What do you think the biggest threat to mankind is?
Narcissistic compassion. Now AIs, you know, it's a threat too, but if we had our act together ethically, it's possible that AI could become a useful servant rather than a tyrannical master. You don't want to automate your tyrannical masters, and that's the danger. That's one of the dangers of AI.
If AI surpasses humanity in general intelligence and becomes super intelligent, then it could become difficult or impossible for humans to control. Just as the fate of the mountain gorilla depends on human goodwill, so might the fate of humanity depend on the actions of a future machine superintelligence. One source of concern is that controlling a superintelligent machine, or instilling it with human-compatible values, may be a harder problem than naively supposed.